Well, this is Knoxville, Tennessee. Beautiful place here, nestled at the north side of the Smoky Mountains. But we're going to look at some of the history of how it got started, the early years. Now, nestled right in the middle of Knoxville is the old James White Fort. They tried to preserve this. No, it's not in the original spot, but they've tried to preserve it. All the artifacts and the buildings. It's in a nice location here. A beautiful place. It's open to the public. A lot of you around the world sees this video, don't know where the state of Tennessee is. Well, right here it is. And back in the early days, before the Revolutionary War, right around, this is how it was marked off. It wasn't Tennessee. You see how North Carolina claimed the state of Tennessee, the land, and Virginia, Kentucky. And after the Revolutionary War, all these patriots, they couldn't afford to pay them for their time and their service, a new country, so they give them land grants. And a lot of these land grants were west of the Smokies here, west of the mountains, into Kentucky, into Tennessee. But they had to get there. And crossing these mountain ranges, such a beautiful sight. Just looks like it goes on forever. And these beautiful waterways, which are now just lakes mostly, go on forever, all the way to the Mississippi River. But here's the true owners of all the land from thousands of years before any white man ever come in here. The great tribes of the continental U.S. Here's a map of them. And a lot of these settlers come in here, like Daniel Boone into Kentucky, they walked in here. But a lot of them come down these riverways too, in the Tennessee Valley especially. Establishing a little trading post, land. And here's what the land looked like back before they become a state back then. In Kentucky, Daniel Boone was trying to settle it at this time after the Revolutionary War. But here in East Tennessee, John Sevier was trying to start a little state called the state of Franklin. But it just come a few short votes short in the House and the Congress of becoming the 14th state. And there's the counties it would have been. But anyway, while he was trying to form the state, he was negotiating with the Indians, signing treaties for the land. And here's one of the first ones and the only ones he really signed in the state of Franklin while it was being formed, was the Dumpling Creek Treaty. Here's the markers for it. Just east of Knoxville. This opened up all the land north of the river towards Knoxville. Well, all the settlers started coming in here, flooding in here for their land grants and acquiring land, building little places like this, all in this Tennessee Valley. Now, this land wasn't like this at first. All these beautiful open fields, farmland. No, here's what it looked like. Just covered with massive virgin forest. Everywhere. Well, they come in here, there was a lot of work to be done to clear this land for farming, houses, little farms, a lot of back-breaking work. And this was rugged country too, treaty or no treaty. These Native Americans, they didn't go for this, so this was the frontier. It was kill or be killed. And a lot of these little settlements, they had to build little forts like this along the frontier. When they had trouble with the Native Americans, they would all gang up together in these little forts. And here's what it looked like back in the old days, the old maps of the Tennessee Valley, East Tennessee. You can see Knoxville in the middle. But in 1783, this is when James White come down. He was a land speculator, and he fought in the Revolutionary War too. And he acquired a lot of land. And here in Knoxville, here's his old fort he built, his little homestead. Starting out, he just built a home for him and his family. And he started out with 1,000 acres, but he finally accumulated 125,000 acres. And here's his little fort and community he built. He mostly built these walls at first just to keep the wild animals out from his livestock and stuff, and to keep some of the Native Americans honest. It's a beautiful little site here nestled right in the middle of Knoxville, trying to be preserved. Now the original site is not here, it's right here. Half a mile away, a parking garage is over it, I reckon, what I've been told. But they tried to preserve this best they could. And there's old pictures of what it used to look like starting out. Beautiful old place. Nestled right on a hill, next above the river, right in the main Knoxville. And it's a nice place to educate and pass this knowledge on of our history. They do a good job. And it's got a lot of nice stuff like this around it. Antiques, how they used to live, what they used to use, the tools they used. And they do a good job of preserving this stuff. How they lived, the furniture. Nice places. The old fireplaces. This is how people lived back in them days. And all their old tools, the old mills. You can see the little cabins. They preserved them about like a family would live in at the time. Beautiful antiques of a time gone by. But this is what started this country. This is how people was when they first come in here. Some didn't even have this coming in this country at first. But this is how they lived. And they do a good job of preserving it too. Now, James White done a lot of his own little treaties. He got along good with the Native Americans. And they didn't treat him as no threat, so they really didn't bother him at first. They got along good. But as time went on, other little stations and settlements started coming into the area. Other families, other little communities getting started. And here's just a few of them. More was added on as time went on. Now, the James White's forts was among one of the first, and they was another place, another station, fort, started up on the Clinch River, way up north from here, located in a place like this up on the Clinch River. It was called Sharp's Station. Here's all that's left of it. It's up on next to the river in Big Ridge State Park. Just a monument. It's all it stands. But here's what the plaque says on it. This is probably the oldest. Maybe. Don't really know between hitting the James White Fort and Knoxville. But they was little bitty places like this all along these frontier. And it just kept growing and growing. But Native Americans began to resent the white man being in here, taking their land. And they signed so many treaties over the year, they don't know treaty after treaty. You can see it here. Here's a treaty map. But usually, they was atrocities and failures of following the treaty on both sides. And they stayed in little places like this, up and down the frontier, little forts. And how did they protect themselves? Basically, all they had was muskets, smoothbore muskets. If they was lucky, they had some Kentucky long rifles. But this is what they look like. Just old flintlocks. Flintlocks of the day. And here's how they work. Better picture of them. And they would take lead, put it in a ladle, heat it over a fire till it becomes liquid. Then they would take that liquid lead and pour it into a mold to the caliber of rifle musket they was using. These are the old molds. And they'd take that ball after they molded it and they'd put it in the musket. And they'd tamp it with a tamping rod, and they would fire. These muskets, it took a large number of people to fight each other. This is what it looked like. Now, the Native Americans, the Creek and the Cherokee, was mostly friendly, but then they had a bad side too that they resented the white man. One of them was Doublehead for the Cherokee, and a Chief John Watts for the Creek. And they was going to come and run all these people out of here. So on morning of September 1793, they was going to go towards James White's fort. Burn it down, get rid of everybody, get them out of there. Well, James White's fort's kind of on a hill, and they could see, I was told, dust in the distance. But they had a cannon here, a little old 6 or 9 pounder here at James White's fort, so they shot it. And I guess the Native Americans noticed this, and they didn't want to go that way, so they went to Cabot Station. And here's the history that happened there. I reckon they besieged it, and they talked them people into surrendering with a white flag. John Watts did, of the Creek Indians. But when they surrendered, they said that Doublehead and his bunch come down on them, massacred over 12 people, mutilated them. He couldn't do nothing about it, John Watts couldn't, but Doublehead took care of it. And then that seemed to ease their warpath party for the time. But what they don't understand is they had enough warriors of 1,000 to take any one of these forts at any time, but they didn't know it. Now, 2 years prior to all this uprising, there was a governor of the territory south of the Ohio River. That was William Blount. And he wanted to start a city down here along the river with the state of Tennessee that was trying to be formed around James White's country. Well, James White allotted 64 plots. This was the start of Knoxville in 1791. They acquired the land. Him and his sons laid out 64 one-half-acre lots to be sold at $8 per lot. So this is the start of Knoxville in 1791. And this is the state of Tennessee. 16th state into the Union in 1796. And Knoxville was the first state capital at that time. It later moved to Nashville. Well, how did Knoxville get its name? Well, it got its name from Henry Knox. He was the Secretary of War under George Washington at the time. That's how Knoxville got its name. Now, James White, he continued living here, doing his business, but before he became a state in 1793, he left Knoxville and went back to another piece of land on up the river, on a plantation, and lived the rest of his life. So that's just touching the piece of just the history of Knoxville. There's so much. Now, Knoxville's grown now. It's got a population now of just over 196,000 people. Still growing. Beautiful place. This old history, I'm so glad they're preserving it. They do a good job, and I want to commend them on it. So I hope you like these little stories of history. I want to thank you for watching. God bless, and I'll see you next time.